My name is Nasser. I lead strategy and insight at DAC. For those who aren't aware, DAC is a global performance agency focused on what we call enterprise to local marketing. So taking national and international brands and allowing them to connect and transact with individuals at the hyperlocal level. We are a Forrester recognized agency based on the impact and the transformational results we drive for our clients. Joining me today, and more importantly, frankly, are our friends from Circle K. So in no particular order, just to introduce them. So we've got Melissa Lessard, Head of Marketing for Canada. Say hi, Melissa.
Hi, bonjour.
There she is. We've got Brittany Strother, who's the Digital Marketing and Media Manager of the Global Division at Circle K, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Say hi, Brittany.
Hi, everyone.
We've got MJ Tierney, who's the Media Director of Circle K Europe, based in Ireland.
Hi, guys.
Let's get into it. So today's session is going to be covering 4 distinct areas that we're going to be asking our colleagues from Circle K to weigh in on. These 4 areas are adapting to and learning from microtrends, how to market a centralized brand versus localized marketing, how to cultivate a local presence online, and then any predictions or closing thoughts. So to kick us off, I'm going to call on MJ, actually, and we're going to start out with this area of adapting to and learning from microtrends. So MJ, if you can kind of start us off and talk about what challenges, given your function, have you had in adapting the brand to local needs, differences, and regional experiences without diluting that brand DNA? And then once you're done, I'm going to ask Brittany if you can kind of follow on that, given your global perspective.
Yeah, it's something that I probably wouldn't call a challenge, but it's something that's just inherent in the company that we are. So we're a company of acquisitions. The company that I was acquired from in Ireland probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. Every time we bring in a new company, it brings this new wave of energy and ideas. And it's not a challenge, but we work quite quickly to almost funnel out the best ideas from that brand and bring them to Circle K. So it's something that we've gotten quite good at. And the guys will probably attest to as well. Probably in the last 24 months or so, we've gotten really, really good at it. We've got a very cohesive and understood brand with all of our markets. And quite quickly now the markets are adapting to, bring those great local ideas that they've had from maybe the business intel that they've got on the ground themselves and really help bringing those to life. So it's something that we work on, but it's definitely a really interesting part of the business and somewhere where we gather most of our ideas.
Okay, Brittany, can you build on that? Do you also think it's not really a challenge?
Yeah, I would have to agree with MJ. Initially, we likely would have said that it was a challenge, but our brand team has certainly done a lot of work in helping us to streamline what our brand tone, our voice, what that look and feel should be like. And we've been able to pull that through down to the super local level. And I agree, we definitely take in the very differences from our acquisitions and we pull those through and use that to our benefit. But it's not necessarily a challenge anymore.
So, Melissa, you're kind of on the opposite end of that, given that you have regional leadership in Canada. What's your perspective to the situation that MJ and Brittany were just talking about?
I think it's interesting because if you look at Circle K as a brand, we're a baby brand. We are fairly new. So we were born in 2015 as the new brand that we are under our new brand structure, which is why we're saying it's maybe less of a challenge, because in 2015, we sat all of our leaders together and decided on what the brand was going to stand for moving forward, because we were a company of brands. Interestingly, that doesn't apply to Quebec, which is where I am based out of. So there's a different perspective here because we still maneuver 2 brands on a daily basis. And as far as we integrated a lot of the brand essence of Couche-Tard into what Circle K is today, there's still some regional differences, first and foremost, the language, but also the culture that we need to always keep in mind when we make any decision that have national impact, because we want to make sure our campaigns and our decision are as relevant in Quebec as in the rest of Canada. And I will admit that leads to interesting discussion internally, but our brand guidelines and our brand team is wide enough and supportive enough that we're able to have those differences still work very well and tie together into what the Circle K brand stands for.
So pick up on that, and if you can expand a little bit more on that, Melissa, please. What are some of the more surprising distinctions that you've seen, and perhaps if you can talk specifically around your experience in Quebec, given the global brand conversations, and you know, I mean, obviously you have the Couche-Tard brand as well in Quebec specifically. So could you kind of explore a little bit more about what some of those surprising distinctions have been from your perspective?
I can share a slice of when I got into my new role and I was presenting to our brand group in Ireland what Couche-Tard stand for. And for Revers in Quebec, you might remember our slushy flavor, slush, it's what we call it here, Foster everywhere else. They weren't cherry or vanilla. We had one called liposuction, and the visual was literally a human getting a liposuction and a kid drinking that product. And that's all that the brand was in store. And that's a sub-brand of Couche-Tard, but we wanted words and we sold tons of it. So as we were building the new brand, you need to take some of those visual into consideration. We had some very politically leading ads back in the days, 20 years ago, and with Muppets made out of the face of our prime minister, which I'm pretty sure we wouldn't want to go there today. So we had to take that history into consideration, and you couldn't move from a brand that was edgy and fun and almost wouldn't give any apologies to become a brand that was more welcoming. So we had to do some of that movement. And you can still see today that when we do the communication towards Couche-Tard, when we do the translation, we make sure we have a cheekiness to our comments. So we're still, we respect the need scope. We're a very welcoming brand. You come as you are, and definitely we want to be there to give you a boost on your life journey. But we can do it in Quebec, being slightly more cheeky, having some humor to it, bringing the culture of the Quebec people in the language that we're using to make sure that it stays relevant while still speaking to the brand as a whole. And I don't think you are going to see any slush called liposuction going forward. I think that's in our past.
I'm kind of sad, to be perfectly frank. I mean, I'm a little relieved because it sounds a little horrifying from my perspective. I'm pretty sure I saw the movie with Ed Norton and Brad Pitt that you're referring to there. But so if we kind of take that perspective, MJ, would liposuction have worked in the Baltics or in the Nordics, where you have coverage over?
I'll start with, I'm not sure, but I would have enjoyed trying to sell that into the markets as an idea and coming up with strategies behind launching it. But it is, and Melissa's point is probably the most relevant to where we are now as a brand. Those nuances can really be adapted into market to a degree, I suppose, obviously liposuction aside. But the humor and what Melissa refers to in terms of that local nature of how, you know, the local individual receives brand and receives that, we've really gotten good at adapting that and working that into market. And actually, when Brittany mentioned our brand team, they've done an amazing amount of work in relation to tone and in relation to context, so that, you know, in certain markets where humor is very, very different, they can take in the kind of concept or the idea of a creative and then localize it very, very quickly. Although, funnily enough, when the brand did launch in the Baltics, I can't remember the country, and apologies, I was working in the Irish BU at the time in the business in the local market. But when they launched it it hadn't been realized at the time, but there wasn't a word for circle. So it became a huge problem for the adverts and the radio adverts. Obviously, the brand name makes sense, but the word itself didn't translate. So that was probably a problem that the marketing team in Europe hadn't envisioned at the time. They got over it, and Circle K is one of the best loved brands in the Baltics now. But yeah, a challenge that you probably scratch your head at when you meet, when a word doesn't make sense at all in the language.
Hopefully not a nation of squares. So that's an interesting angle. Brittany, I know that you were heavily involved around, you know, kind of the brand identity and getting that consistency, but where a brand is so tied to humor, and being able to kind of connect in that way at the local level, like did you face particular challenges in that adaptation?
I don't believe that we really faced that particular challenge here, but it was definitely something that should be top of mind of how do we lean in appropriately versus going so far over the line that it's misconstrued and that we end up hurting ourselves throughout that process. So it really was just striking that fine balance of understanding what that tone is and where can we lean in versus, hey, actually this is not good for us. We should take a step back. But we welcome that because that's how we grow. That's how we learn. And it's how we evolve. So yeah.
Fair enough. So why do we, if staying with you, Brittany, and let's build on that a little bit and move into the area around centralized brand versus local marketing. From your perspective, given that you have a global responsibility, what's the brand's role in supporting the local marketing team from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's really providing just overall guidance and support for what they are trying to do. But we're pulling that up into a central perspective of one voice, one team, one experience for the customer, just through and through. That is really the brand's ultimate role in terms of how we support the localized markets and their efforts, just providing that perspective without really getting into, okay, well, this makes sense for your market, but it doesn't work here. But just overarchingly, how can we bring that together? How do we have that same look and feel, that tone, that voice, that experience for customers? That's really the brand's, that's really the space that we should play in.
So it sounds like, let's continue down this vein, Melissa. It sounds like you've established this extremely collaborative kind of cross-border culture. And we talked a little bit about the brand's responsibility to the local operations. How does it work in the other direction? So you mentioned insight and being able to pull out these insights. How does that local insight, that local knowledge from the regional marketing teams play into global strategies? And are you maybe able to share an example of something like that happening?
So our base insight is very much aligned. And there's been ideas, and one of those being gamification. So the fact that our clients want to have fun and we're a convenience, we shouldn't be taking ourselves too seriously. And it started in Europe in a language that I honestly couldn't read or listen to. And we have one person in Western Canada, who's our smallest region in Canada. So that's sort of neat. And they created a mock-up of that. And the second we saw it, we had a feeling we're onto something. So we went to look at all the regional insight. What's that need for fun? What's that need for instant gratification? First thing you see, it's the same across all regions. So we took that and we lifted it. And now gamification is part of our national strategy in Canada, 6 to 8 months out of the year. And all of our regions are holding hands and are making this a tremendous success. So it started one good idea somewhere, picked up, and now it's basically one of the pillar of our strategy.
So I think once you have this local insight, MJ, if you can talk a little bit about how you use that, especially in the media environment that you have oversight over. You cover a lot of countries, a lot of languages, a lot of different media platforms, and media is incredibly dynamic. How to use that local insight, especially right now when we are in an environment, in the middle of a pandemic, which is highly localized, with things turning on and off and shutting down and starting up again. Could you talk a little bit about that and how to use that local insight to drive more global decisions?
Right when the global pandemic kicked off, first of all, I can remember the desk I was sitting in when it happened in the Dublin office. The Irish market would traditionally at Christmas time, at Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, do a free coffee for first responders. Very kind of nice, very strong CSR campaign, but nice initiative I've got an aunt who's a nurse and another aunt who's a guard, who's a policewoman in Ireland. And they've commented to me going, it's so nice to be calling in after the shift and just get that's on the house or whatever. We switched it on in Ireland as soon as the Irish market switched it on, as soon as the pandemic hit, with probably not really a detailed understanding of exactly how long this was going to run, because normally we do it for a day or a weekend. It ended up lasting, I think, close to 6 or 8 weeks. It went from Ireland in a week or 10 days to 3 or 4 of the European markets. It went from 3 or 4 of the European markets within 4 or 5 days to all of Europe. In the same time, Canada and the US were mobilizing to get it into the regions over there. And we ended up giving away over 3 million cups of coffee, frosters, Polar Pops, drinks, and I suppose just acknowledging the work that the frontline responders were doing. But quite quickly, within 4 weeks, something that had been a let's switch this on, it makes sense, they're on the front line, a global idea. And I suppose it's very relevant to how we're enabling, and as a company, we enable that right to local straight up. You know, in 4 weeks' time, if you were sitting in the Dublin office as the local marketing team or category team, you were going, God, there's our idea come to life across the world, and making a massive impact. So yeah, we work as extensions of the business units and as the markets, and we're there to value add and to advise and to support, but just to enable them to do the best of their ability.
Perhaps in kind of framing this up for us, Brittany, we talked about the peculiarities and different expectations of local markets. How can you meet all of these different expectations in an online environment?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. Some would even believe that it could be considered impossible. But one thing that we decided to do as a brand was we took the time to say, hey, now is the time that we actually turn on social listening. Let's really ramp up our efforts here and understand from a consumer and a customer perspective, what are they looking for? What are they needing? What areas are there? What area is their fatigue that they are coming up against? And how can we provide those little boosts across their day? We were able to use social listening and share that globally with leadership as well as our partners in the local markets. And it made sense in terms of, okay, regardless of some of these local nuances and changes and things, we understand that globally our customers are responding in this way. And it makes so much more sense for us as a business to respond to that need. So really taking a customer-centric approach is what actually helped us in the moment. It helped us to really streamline what we needed to do. And we looked at leveraging low-hanging fruit, social media. That was probably the quickest way that we could mobilize and change based on those local needs and perspectives, but still just being able to provide just an overarching perspective and just need for our customers.
MJ, if you can talk perhaps a little bit about that agility that you had to bring, was that in the DNA of the team, or was that something that you had to kind of work through in order to get to? And moreover, was it something that you had to kind of overcome any sort of barriers in order to use this data to influence your media decisions?
There's a couple of points to it, and again, it's back to it being a very interesting time for marketing and to be working in the context of marketing. It actually, we're in a retail business, fast-moving consumer goods. You need to be agile day to day, no matter what's going on. Never mind a global pandemic, but that brought us much closer together. So our retail teams, our retail sales operation teams, there was cross-functional updates on a daily basis, understanding what is sales data telling us, what categories are performing well, what trends are completely new to us in terms of, so grocery, and specifically in some markets in Europe, we're probably not as strong in the grocery category as we would have been traditionally 10 years ago, because very few people are coming to get your weekly shop at a convenience store. But in actual fact, because the grocery stores were so limited, because there were so many queues, a lot of people had pivoted back to coming to us. So sales data was telling us those channels had increased. We also understood through the social listening, as Brittany mentioned, that people were worried about hygiene and sanitization. So we moved to put PPE in on sites, gloves at the pumps, things to combat that. And actually, in the same vein, through that feedback loop, through RSO and through social listening and through category, we ended up understanding that some of the immediate messages in media in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic is, we're open, what time our locations are open at, we're safe, we're put in these hygiene protocols, and just the basics, and it dropped right back to, people just wanting to know, I can go there, I can be safe, and I can get what you need. So what I need. So we pivoted some of our media and marketing messages in the first couple of days and weeks into that area. But then we started to really learn from it. And when you talk about being agile and pivoting your business and your business model, we then understood that, look, there's an opportunity for us here in the click and collect service, in the online service, because again, people are spending a lot more time at home. And we moved to launch, and we launched it in 3 markets, and we're developing on it again, and it'll end up becoming a staple of what we offer. But we launched from the ground up a click and collect service in 3 of the European markets, behind which we worked on, and I would have worked with the European markets on a media strategy for launching that. And it's quite funny, I'd say within about not funny. I really don't like using that term when it comes to the pandemic, but just how quickly the thing changed and everything changed. But we often look at a 360 media journey for us as a forecourt business, and one of the touch points of that is the forecourt and landing at the forecourt, coming into the store and back out again, and then you see us on your mobile phone if we serve you a digital ad. You might catch us in the car, on the radio on the way home. You might catch us on TV. So the very kind of traditional 360 marketing journey changed almost overnight. So in Ireland, you couldn't travel but 2 kilometers outside your house. Everybody was working from the desk and getting very little social contact. You maybe weren't picking up your newspaper or your print like you would have had before. So we found things like podcasting. We found things like actually credible news sources were key in terms of inventory when it came to digital media at the time. Things like Spotify and served location services ads, where we opened these click and collect locations, and becoming much more using the data to be really close to where the customer was for the new offer, and to be really targeted and segmented into what we were trying to do. So that's probably where I suppose some of the joy came out of working in that period. It was taking all those learnings, working with your colleagues, and there was a real sense of everybody needed to help everybody within the company, from all of the categories and from all of the different functions, from local right up to global. And it was a real time of learning for us as a business. And I think a lot of those changes haven't gone anywhere, and I think they're only going to make us stronger. And actually, I think Melissa might have put her hand up a moment ago, but one of those learnings was, and I'll let Melissa take it because it was an idea that came out of Canada, but through that social listening that we locked in straight away quite quickly, about 4 weeks into the first responders campaign, we got this really rich feedback everywhere. And when she talks about us being, Melissa says we're more alike than we are different, the feedback was consistent across the globe. Yeah, it's great you're giving coffee to nurses and doctors, and go use Circle K. But what about the guy who's bringing the groceries to the cocooners who can't get out? What about the grocery store worker who's stacking our shelves? And that led to a beautiful campaign that came out of Canada that then came back to Europe. And Melissa probably have a better idea of how it grew.
Go ahead, Melissa. And I think I'd like you to take this story and as a way to just build on a broader theme. So the fact is that you have had immense success building a highly recognizable brand, particularly notably in Quebec, through your stores. What has contributed to that success? And the story that MJ was talking about, that presumably you'll talk about it in a moment. How is that aligned with that, with driving that success?
Yeah, so what MJ was referencing is what we call the Little Thank You campaign. So and interestingly, and that's a change in behavior, is we now have executive ringing us up and saying, what's on social media today? What are they saying about us today? Which had never happened in my life. I never had an SVP or a CMO say, can you please let me know what our consumers are telling about us on social? We were more around, let's do research, let's survey. And all of a sudden we realized, wow, within a day, we can have the richest survey in the world, because frankly, some people have more time through COVID, and they were telling us honestly what they liked and what they disliked about the experience and how we're managing the crisis. And the biggest feedback we had was, we love what you're doing, but I'm not a first responder, but I clean the hospital. I bring food to my in-laws who cannot get out. And we started seeing this trend of thank yous. I want to say thank you to this person. Can you help me? So we came out, I think, within a few days of, we're going to help you. We're going to have Circle K little thank yous. And we're going to give you a website. You just click a link and you can send one of our products to somebody as a thank you. The redemption period was long. We were not pushing people into the store, but we're going to help you say thank you, because we know it's not necessarily easy. And it was all digital. There was nothing physical. So we were comfortable with the COVID situation. And that speaks a little bit to your other question, which is the Couche-Tard brand in Quebec, which is particular because it's been here for a long time. And the company, although we're called Circle K now in most places in the world, our 4 founders were out of Quebec. If anybody that's listening ever had the chance to meet them, they are some of the most thankful, generous, open and honest persons I've ever met in my life. And it's really part of our DNA. So we let people do mistakes. We support them. We make sure we're always there for our colleagues. We're very entrepreneurial. So that speaks to it, that there's a good idea. And within 2 days, we're live. We're basically scrambling at getting the the graphics up on social because we don't have a media plan yet, but this has got to be done. This is the right thing to do for a customer. This is what they're asking for. Go. So that comes a little bit from the DNA that our culture has from our founding fathers. And in Quebec, what's interesting is the brand is uber strong. So it's positive and negative. When Couche-Tard does something great, it's great. When Couche-Tard misses a step, everybody knows. And I can tell you, I've managed the same situation in English Canada where you can miss a step and literally nobody will realize it. And in Quebec, you have a page in the news because something might have gone wrong. So it's a double-edged sword, but it's great because in Quebec, it started as really your neighborhood convenience store. And there was their four entrepreneur, and they made it bigger, and they bought some bigger chain at that time. They barely spoke French, but they barely spoke English, but then they bought a store in English Canada and then in the United States. And then it's just a success story that we have today. So there's a lot of respect for the brand because it's been there for a long time. People grew up with Couche-Tard and with the Owl. And that's why, to my earlier comments about sometimes our campaign being slightly different, we're not letting go of that community and being close to our customers because it makes sense, and that's what we're known for, and that's what people are experiencing in our store. So it needs to show on social and vice versa. I think we were able, as we build a Circle K brand in a project we called Skyfall in 2015, we brought that in. And we brought that in with our founders, and it needed to be at the core of the new Circle K brand as well, because it was at the core of the values that built this company and that are making us widely successful today.
So just with your closing thoughts, we talked a little bit about the pandemic and how that's changed a lot of the ways of working and the ways of communicating, not just internally for the organization, but also with our customers. So what do you think, and perhaps we can start with Brittany, how will the pandemic change and affect brands' ways of thinking about local presence?
Yeah, I mean, it already has changed the way that we think about local presence. It's changed in how we operate, the way that we listen to our consumers and how we respond. I believe that we certainly understand that our goal may be for our customers to have the same experience across the board, but that there will be some of those nuances. Circle K is not going to have maybe that Chick-fil-A effect where it's my pleasure every single time, but how do we lean in? How do we respond to what our customers actually want, and just being nimble in that space? So I mean, the pandemic has definitely, it's made it much more aware of how important this is.
Could you pick up on that, MJ, please? Your predictions, final thoughts around this?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing for us potentially has been the shift to, I suppose, a focus on digital. And as Melissa mentioned, some of our senior executives really, I suppose, seeing the importance of those channels. Not that they didn't before, but that was where we were meeting customers head on pretty much, because a lot of people were social snacking in between their bit of time at the desk. A lot of people were on the laptop or the desktop, in the afternoon and quite late. So the digital journey really accelerated for every company then. And I think even in terms of small business, you've seen that definitely in local regions when restaurants closed and a lot of retail was affected, they pivoted into digital. So everybody needed to be there. And I think that presented an opportunity. But in respect of where we are, for Brittany and I specifically, but for the company as a whole, it's after presenting a real opportunity to accelerate our digital journey. And most of the calls that I'm on a daily basis, or at least half of them, are part of a journey that we're undertaking now as a wider company. Again, back to the fact that we're a company of mergers and acquisitions. We have a lot of legacy systems, a lot of legacy data points, a lot of layered in things that have been plugged in together that are working just fine for what we want, maybe, and what we wanted at the time when we brought in a business. But to develop long term on that, we're on a digital maturity journey where we're very young, and we're young as a brand, as Melissa touched on, but we're very young and almost nascent when it comes to our digital journey. So we've realized that we've put some building blocks in place. We've got cross-functional teams working on, how do we merge that data in the most applicable way to be able to tailor that experience, from to a personalized experience for customers to enable that surprise and delight. So how do we stop serving fuel ads to our coffee customers? How do we really sing home with our regular customers who are really, loyal users who are there and there again? How do we pop them a little message, say, listen, thanks a million, pop in and grab a free coffee on us? So stuff that seems quite simple, but as you'd know, when it comes to data and tech and plugging it all in and then merging it back out into campaign, it can be quite, technical and quite difficult at times. But the benefit of what's happened is the business sees that's where we need to get to, and that's where we need to develop to as a brand. And I was on a call with our business to business colleagues looking at one of the websites, and for the first time the reference was, how about we make it more like the Apple site? And for a business to business customer to potentially get an experience from Circle K when applying for a fuel card, at least with the vision about what are Apple doing, is a big shift for us, and shows that as a company, every cross-functional department wants to move to giving a customer a seamless experience. And look, at the end of the day, in 10 years time, the experience with whatever we're holding in our hand or whatever is in our pocket is only going to grow and grow and grow. So we need to be there and meet the customer in that area. And I think we're really, as a company now, understanding that that's what we need to push on with.
Love it. Last word to you, Melissa. Any final thoughts around where this is going, not just in the current pandemic, but beyond?
I think it's one thing that we realized through the pandemic, I'm guessing both personally and professionally, is you can never take anything for granted. So we're really looking at being more agile, more flexible. If somebody comes to us and presents us something around the Olympics, are they going to happen? I don't know. Am I going to have consumer next summer that are going to want to do something? For sure. So we're really looking more at agility, being nimble, being able to turn on and off a switch. Where I'm located, we're going back in lockdown in a few hours. So we know it's happening. We've learned from the first time. So all that agility, having a toolbox of social and digital tools that enable us to reach our customers when they need us, when they're communicating something to us, that's going to stay. That's going to stay with us forever. And it's going to be part of our DNA for sure. I think on another level, we've seen how, again, you don't want to take anything for granted. We need to have some relief on our colleagues at store level. And the pandemic put that at the forefront, but it's also true in the day-to-day life. They have a lot to do. So it really creates even more pressure on us as how do we make their life easier? So our clients' life easier and our colleagues at store life easier so that the experience is as seamless as possible. We're not always going to manage that 100%, as Brittany said, but it really made us realize how we can contribute to the customer experience in a social and digital way, with answering some questions on social media, with taking pressure off of them and making sure we're able to have that one brand, one tone even more consistently. So I also believe that we'll stay more focused on the people and on making their life easier, which can sometimes go way more for the long run than having coffee at $1 with a big red sign. If you're able to thank your colleagues with a coffee, thank your client with a coffee, it's brought us back to the basic of human beings. So in some ways, the pandemic is good in grounding us in what our customer wants and how we need to react to anything that may happen in the future, positive or slightly less positive.
Thank you, Melissa. I think it's inspiring, this idea of taking something positive out of this entire experience. So how do we carry forward that agility, human-centric experiences, and doing it across 13,000, maybe more locations? Who knows where we're going to go in the future? That is no mean feat, and I commend the entire Circle K team for having achieved it, and hopefully we'll continue to achieve it moving forward. So thank you today for your time, MJ, Brittany, and Melissa, and all of your insights. Thank you from me, Nasser from DAC. Have a great day.